Buongiorno, Jeremy Rifkin, siamo al TOSM a Torino, all'Oval, e grazie per averci concesso un'intervista. Oggi ha parlato tantissimo del modello della terza rivoluzione digitale e industriale, terza rivoluzione industriale che dovrebbe unire la rivoluzione digitale, quindi internet, con anche una rivoluzione in campo energetico, quindi trovare nuove risorse alternative all'energia attuale, alla dipendenza dal petrolio. Abbiamo twittato il suo intervento e sono arrivate tantissime domande dai lettori per questa video intervista, per cui le leggerei subito una domanda. I'm going to be reading you some of the questions. The first question that arrives is from Dario Congiu. Dario Congiu chiede: partendo dal presupposto che la gestione del nostro Stato non è realmente in mano ai nostri politici, ma in mano alle multinazionali utilizzando i lobbisti, non crede che ci vorrebbero regole più stringenti sulla possibilità di essere eletti, visto che i parlamentari scelgono per tutti noi?
What's interesting is that we are in the midst of a great paradigm shift. We're moving from a second industrial revolution based on elite energies, fossil fuels, nuclear power, because fossil fuels and uranium are only found in a few places. They require huge military and geopolitical investments, lots of capital, and they scale vertically, so they rely on large centralized production facilities and logistics chains and supply chains. And so you get an economy that's pretty much centralized and top down. And our political landscape tends to be more centralized and top down in terms of political parties in every country. And there's a relationship there. What's interesting about the third industrial revolution is that it scales laterally. The third industrial revolution sees the coming together of the internet with green electricity, green renewable energy. The internet is distinguished as a communication tool because it isn't the same as what I grew up on. I grew up on telephone, radio, and television, which are organized centrally, top down, telecommunications of the 20th century. What's interesting about the internet is it's distinguished because it scales distributed and collaborative, and the power is lateral power, side by side. So today we have 2.3 billion people, mostly young, a third of the planet's population, who can take a little cell phone or a small desktop computer in their hand and send their own video, audio, and text to all the other 2 billion people at the same time, at the speed of light, with far more distributed collaborative power, lateral power, than the centralized telecommunication networks of the 20th century. And so we have a generation that's growing up with the idea that that sharing information is their right, and that information should be virtually free. And so imagine it this way: when Steve Jobs, 1970, came on the scene, we had some big centralized supercomputers, very expensive, controlled by a few companies. They controlled the information. As a result of Steve Jobs and all the entrepreneurs of Silicon Valley in the 70s and 80s, now everyone has their own desktop computer, and we all create our own information and share it in social spaces on the internet. We've democratized information. What's happening now in the last 24 months, especially in Germany, is that this internet revolution, communication revolution, is now merging with a new energy regime, distributed energies. And when the internet begins to manage distributed energies, we have a completely new economic revolution. Distributed energies are energies that are found everywhere: the sun, the wind, the heat under the ground, the garbage converted back to energy, rural agricultural waste, ocean tides and waves. These green energies, renewable energies, are found in every square inch of the world. They're distributed. So what's beginning to happen in Germany, and just starting in Italy, but really advanced in Germany, is millions of buildings are being converted, homes, offices, and factories, to your own personal power plant. Just like we went from mainframe computers to your own desktop computers. So now, all over Germany, homes, offices, and buildings are little power plants. They have solar photovoltaic panels on the roof to collect the sun, little vertical wind to collect wind off the sides of the building. In the basements, they have geothermal heat pumps grabbing that heat from underneath the ground for energy. They're converting their garbage back to energy. So what you have to imagine here, and in Italy, it's just beginning in Italy. What we have to imagine in Italy and in Europe is converting every single existing building to a green power plant to collect that energy. And then we're going to store that energy in the form of hydrogen, like we store media and digital. And then, if we don't need some of that electricity, we're going to share it on an energy internet from Italy across Europe. Just like we now create our own information, we store it in digital and we share it online. So what we're seeing here is the democratization of energy, and the reason we can do it is we have democratic internet communications managing it. This is power to the people. When hundreds of millions of people who can create their own green energy like they create their own information and share it on vast energy internets across continents, this is going to completely change the economic, political landscape. So here's my sense on it. I've been talking to the young people in the October 15th movement in Spain, in Italy. I met with a lot of them. And you know, the internet generation, they don't think about the same politics as my generation. My generation, all the politics was on a spectrum between right and left, and between conservative and liberal, between capitalism and socialism. The young internet generation, they don't think right-left. It's not even on their radar screen. When a young person in the internet generation thinks about political institutions or educational institutions or business institutions, they judge them by a different political formula. They ask, are these institutions, is their behavior centralized, top-down, closed, and proprietary, or is this political institution or business or educational institution, is its institutional behavior distributed, collaborative, open, and transparent? This is the generation of lateral power. So the old pyramids are dropping and lateral power is coming, and what's interesting is only half of the third industrial revolution has been in place. Steve Jobs and his generation created the democratization of information through the internet. The next half, the closure on the third industrial revolution, is then taking that information technology and democratizing energy. It's going to change everything, and it's going to change politics fundamentally.
David Osimo just asked something that has to do with just what you just said. Okay, sharing, but extreme interdependence is at the root of the financial crisis, and opening up isn't winning. I mean, Apple is a closed system. Mm-hmm. So, because you keep making the example of Steve Jobs, but Apple Computer is a closed company, and the operating system is closed. So, do you think the future is more Google-like or more Apple-like? And do you think the future is more open, or is the closed system that Apple is bringing as an example winning? Scrive David Osimo: personalmente sono d'accordo che l'apertura, la condivisione e la collaborazione aiutino, ma l'interdipendenza estrema è anche alla radice della crisi finanziaria e l'apertura non sempre paga. Ad esempio, l'impresa più innovativa degli ultimi anni, Apple, è anche una delle più chiuse. Lei pensa che il futuro sia più di Google, cioè aperta, o che di Apple chiusa?
I think there's a struggle going on between whether the third industrial revolution is going to be truly distributed and lateral and open, or whether some will try to institutionally concentrate it. But in the final analysis, you cannot beat distributed power. Let me give you an example. The music companies, they didn't understand file sharing of music. All of a sudden, millions of young kids apparently had nothing else to do after school but collaborate with each other to create software to share all the music across the world. And the music companies thought it was a joke. And then they got worried. Then they went out of business. And the newspapers, as you know, did not understand the power of the blogosphere. Why would millions of people freely share their knowledge, information, and news with each other? Now the newspapers are either creating blogs or they're going out of business. So what I think is happening is that the old guard thinks top-down. Power is pyramidal. The young generation thinks of power as side-by-side, lateral power. It really does change the gestalt, as we say. It changes the way our mind actually organizes reality. But I think it's a struggle. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Even when it comes to renewable energies, you know, the European Union has committed itself to a 5-pillar third industrial revolution. I was privileged to develop the plan with the EU. It's the formal plan of the 27 member states. And I should say Germany, and I've advised the Chancellor since she came in, Chancellor Merkel, Germany is on fire. They're moving to all 5 pillars of this third industrial revolution, and they're leading out the way into the new era. But even with this, you take something like renewable energies. Our first thought was, well, why don't we create centralized solar parks and wind parks where there's a lot of sun and wind, and then send it out to everyone else. Now, I don't oppose a more concentrated use of these green energies, in solar parks, wind parks, hydro parks, geothermal parks, but you cannot run a continental economy on centralized renewable energies. They don't give you enough energy. You can put all the centralized energies, you can't run a continental economy because centralized is too limited. So while I don't oppose the more concentrated uses of solar, wind, and geothermal, we got to get off carbon to deal with climate change. What we have to realize is that renewable energies are found everywhere, in every square inch of this biosphere. Why would we only collect them in a few central points? That's 20th century thinking, top down. So what we have to imagine is everyone collecting and harvesting energy on site where they live, and then sharing it on vast energy internets. And when millions of little players, small companies, medium-sized companies, homeowners, cooperatives, begin to collect their own energy locally, and then share it collaboratively across continents, the amount of energy dwarfs whatever you can get with either concentrated wind or solar or geothermal, or really dwarfs nuclear and coal-fired power plants. It just wipes it out. So I think we have to start to readjust our consciousness to this new reality.
Giovanni Maddaloni is asking, what do you think of natural gas? Che cosa pensa del gas naturale?
Well, natural gas, I think, is a suitable transition strategy, but it doesn't give us much time because natural gas shadows the same productivity curves as crude oil, and we've now peaked in crude oil. We peaked. So natural gas follows the same cost curve and the same peak curve. Now, there is shale gas now. Shale gas deposits are all over the world, but the problem with shale gas is they contaminate water supplies. Now, this is reality. My wife and I have a farm in Virginia, and upstream from us are the Pennsylvania farms, and now with shale gas, the companies have contaminated forever the water supplies in our neighboring farms in Pennsylvania. So we're worried. I mean, this is real for us, because if the water on our farm is contaminated, that's it. It becomes worthless. So I think natural gas, not shale gas, but natural gas, it burns better, less CO2, but it does still create CO2 and climate change, and it follows the cost curve as crude oil. So it's a transition. I certainly think that it's better than using oil and coal, but it only buys us a little time. What we should be doing is really moving quickly into green energies because they're ample. 45 minutes of sunlight can power the world for a year. We've got so much geothermal heat for energy under the planet that it can provide us till kingdom comes. If we only harness a fifth of the wind of the world, we can have enough power for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So we've got all this power that's sustainable, it's clean, it moves with the rhythms of the planet, and we have the technology now to use it. So why wouldn't we be doing that? And let me use an anecdote. When Chancellor Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come into Berlin the first few weeks of her administration to help her government address the question, how do we grow the German economy and create jobs in Germany in the 21st century? Now, no small task, because Germany is the most robust industrial country in the world per capita. Absolutely. And it vies with China as the leading exporting power, and China has 1 billion people and Germany has 80 million. Now, it's a powerhouse. When I got to Germany, the first question I asked the Chancellor is, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy or the European or world economy in the last stages of a great energy era? The fact is, fossil fuel energies, they're sunsetting. And remember, everything in this society is embedded with fossil fuels. Fertilizers, pesticides are made out of fossil fuels. All our construction materials are made out of fossil fuels. Most of our pharmaceutical products are synthetic fiber. So we built a whole civilization on these carbon deposits. But the price of these fossil fuels are going through the roof. And therefore, all the prices across the supply chain are going up for everything. And we're seeing another collapse of the global economy because of the price of oil. The other fuels are equally expensive. Added to this, the technologies based on these fuels, like the internal combustion engine, they're exhausted. There's no multiplier effect. And now the whole infrastructure based on fossil fuels is dying. It's on life support. So what I said to the Chancellor, how do you grow a new economy for the young generation around the world based on an old second industrial revolution game plan that's dying? You can't do it. So what we have to do is create a new vision. and a new game plan for the world. And the third industrial revolution fits the sensibilities, and it fits the passions, it fits the commitment of an internet generation, because it's the internet brought to energy.
Di Marco Ciaramella, volevo chiedere se ho ben capito che aveva proposto di utilizzare l'idrogeno come vettore energetico non da usare nel luogo del consumo, ma addirittura da distribuire con un complesso sistema di tubi e pompe. Come mai non fosse adeguata la rete di distribuzione tradizionale basata sulla conversione di energia elettrica, che è già molto efficiente, diffusa e consolidata?
It isn't, because the wind isn't always blowing when you need the electricity. We put in big wind parks in California, and unfortunately the wind is chosen to blow at night. But we need the electricity during the day. So the minute you get the wind, you have to use the electricity. So the wind isn't being cooperative. And of course, look at Italy. There are times when there's no sun.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example of the problem. We've put in feed-in tariffs in Italy and around Europe, meaning your electricity bill's gone up slightly. So there's a pool of money. So early first adopters can use that pool of money to put photovoltaics on their roof, or windmills on their property, etc., geothermal heat pumps, and allow them to get premium price for sending their green electricity back to the grid, so that the early adopters can make money and help us scale in the technology. These feed-in tariffs have been wildly successful in Germany, all over Europe, and even in Italy. People want these. The problem in Italy is you didn't collect enough of the money. In other words, you did a feed-in tariff that was very limited, because millions of Italians would like to have done this, and you have to make a bigger feed-in tariff. But what's happened now, we have regions in Europe that are creating 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% green electricity. Navarra and Aragon, Spain, because of feed-in tariffs, they have 70% green energy. Here's the problem. We're losing 3 out of 4 kilowatts because we have no way to store them. So all of a sudden you'll get too much solar electricity into the grid, and it surges, or you don't get enough and you have a brownout. All right, so we need hydrogen and other storage technologies to store this energy. Now, we want to use batteries and flywheels and capacitors, water pumping, they're all good storage. Hydrogen is probably the center of the network, because it's the basic element of the universe. It's what the universe is made out of. And it's modular, so you can use hydrogen to store green electricity in a tiny little flat or in a big utility company. So here's how it works. You get photovoltaic power plant on your roof to generate green electricity with the sun when it's shining. If you have some surplus electricity you're not using at the moment, you put that green electricity in water, just like high school chemistry. Yeah. The hydrogen comes out of the water. I see you were in this class. Yeah. And it comes into a tank. Yes. Then when the sun's not shining on your roof, you simply convert that hydrogen back to green electricity, so you have a reliable supply, so you don't have surges and blackouts on the grid. You have it reliable over 24-hour periods.
Yes, let's talk about Piemonte and smart cities, and how the future of this region of Piemonte and Torino, how can that be organized in an efficient way?
You know, I've been here in the last...
Parliamo del futuro del Piemonte e di Torino, come può essere organizzato in maniera efficiente.
I've been here for the last few days, and I've had the opportunity, first I was in Milan, and I had the opportunity to talk with the new mayor of Milan and the city council. Then I came here and I saw my old friend, Mr. Fassimo, who's now the new mayor, and a terrific guy. And what's interesting about this region, both Lombardy and Piedmont, is the corridor from Milan to Torino is the powerhouse of Italy, and it's the powerhouse of Europe. What distinguishes Italy is it has the most powerful network of small and medium-sized enterprises in the world. The Brits can't compete with you, the French. When you take a look at this region, but all of Italy from Rome north, but especially this region that extends, I would say, from Milan to Torino, you have all of the critical companies that would be instrumental to the 5 pillars of the third industrial revolution. You have renewable energy technology companies here. You have the best in construction here. You have IT companies, ITC companies all over this region. You have transport in this region. So you have all of the pillars that would be necessary to create nodes to establish a third industrial revolution. And then what hit me in this region is you are a powerhouse of universities and academic research institutions all through this region from Milan to Torino. And what I think is possible is this. If you take a look at the second industrial revolution, it took off in Silicon Valley. And the reason it took off in Silicon Valley is there was an embarrassment of riches of universities and academic institutions and research institutes with startup companies and with IT companies. So Silicon Valley became a hothouse, a laboratory for hosting the new developments that created the internet and the personal computer, the ITC revolution. What's interesting about this corridor from Milan to Torino is it has tremendous university and research institutions, and it has all the key technology companies of the third industrial revolution. And what I envision here is a biosphere valley. Just as we had Silicon Valley for the second industrial revolution, we could have a biosphere valley here from Milan to Torino, and I absolutely believe it has the expertise and the technological capabilities and the entrepreneurial tradition, and it's sensitive to the sustainability and ecological betterment. So I actually think that this region, this could be the biosphere valley for Italy in the 21st century and for Europe.
Molti lettori hanno chiesto, hanno apprezzato i libri del professor Rifkin, gli hanno chiesto: ma secondo lei questa Italia di oggi, così malandata dal punto di vista politico, economico e ambientale, può risorgere? Quali sono le 2 o 3 cose realistiche che secondo lei potrebbe fare il bel paese per un futuro diverso e migliore dell'attuale? Che cosa dovrebbe cambiare?
I mean, that's multi-part. I think let's first talk about the changes. You have a new prime minister, Mr. Monti, very well respected all over the world. You have a breath of fresh air crossing this country right now, and some expectations. Now let me say, I've been meeting with heads of state and government leaders the last several weeks in Europe, and what I'm saying to them is this. Yes, austerity. Everyone's talking austerity, but let's be clear. Austerity is coming, but it has to be based on a set of principles that represent the European way of life, meaning, number 1, do not compromise the social market model. That's the imprimatur of Europe. 2, make sure that no Italian falls behind in the way to the future. 3, ensure that the European dream, which is quality of life, is not eroded. And then 4, make sure that with austerity that we do not compromise sustainability with our environment. Then, once those principles are upheld, we still have to make cuts. There are plenty of places to make cuts without compromising those 4 principles. But if we only are making cuts, we're doomed. If the discussion is only about cutting federal deficits, we're doomed, because the financial markets, first they'll say, we want you to cut your federal budgets because you have too big a ratio of government debt to GDP. So then the governments cut their federal budgets and they show austerity, and then the financial markets come back and say, aha, you don't have a plan to grow. So we're still not going to give you the credit. It's a catch-22. So there has to be austerity that's responsible with those 4 principles in place, but there has to be a growth plan to go with it. You can put in regulations. Let's say the new federal government puts in regulations to eliminate the bureaucracy, close up the financial loopholes, establish a more responsible accounting procedures. That's all good, and that should be done. But unless there's an economic growth plan, these regulations are working in an old system that can't create new jobs and new businesses. So the regulations have to accompany a new economic paradigm. And so what I think has to happen in Italy is we have to move a third industrial revolution infrastructure. How would it happen? It'll happen in the localities and regions. For example, I have a group of 120 companies that I chair, and it's called the Third Industrial Revolution CEO Business Roundtable. IBM, Cisco, Philips, Schneider, major architectural companies, urban development companies, IT companies, transport, Daimler, GM, a lot of companies. And what we've done is we've come together and we are collaborating in customizing master plans for cities, regions, and countries so they can create the 5-pillar node infrastructure collaboratively. So we did the master plan for San Antonio, which is our 7th largest city. The mayor of Rome, Mayor Alamano came to us and said, can you develop jointly with us a plan? And Rome brought the best experts together in the region with our best experts, and we worked together and we created a long-term plan to reposition Rome as a node in a third industrial revolution biosphere. We did Utrecht in the Netherlands, which is the fastest growing region in Europe. Monaco for Prince Albert. We know this can be done. So what has to happen in Italy is each locality and each region has to begin to bring together local business, local civil society, local government, sit down at the table, bring in expertise from all over, and you have great expertise in Italy, fashion this 5-pillar node for a third industrial revolution. And then what is interesting about these nodes, the minute you start this, jobs, huge jobs, day one. And new business opportunities, day one. Why? We have to convert the entire infrastructure of every city, put in renewable technologies, convert every building in each region to a power plant, set up hydrogen storage infrastructure, create an energy internet across the regions, plug in e-mobility transport. That means millions of jobs across Italy and thousands of new businesses. Germany's doing that. That's why they have such low unemployment. They're moving into this technology. And the interesting thing about a third industrial revolution is it likes to run, uninhibited across land masses, across borders, across boundaries, till it reaches the ocean edge. It's continental. Just like information likes to run free on the internet. So we've noticed that when a city or region creates a 5-pillar third industrial revolution node, it immediately wants to connect with the next node and the next node. Why? Because let's say that here in Torino you have a node and you have energy. You want to share your surplus and then create a node with Milan to share your energy surplus when Milan needs it. But then when you have a deficit, you want to get Milan's energy connected back to you. So it's going to come in like Wi-Fi, node to node. Each node has energy surpluses and energy deficits during the year. So it has to share on an energy internet with other nodes so that you can collaborate and share energy across continents. It's power to the people. It's what we call, you could call it distributed capitalism. It's actually beyond capitalism and socialism because it requires everyone being an entrepreneur because we're all going to create our own energy like we create our own information. But it also requires a collaborative space where we share this energy in a social commons. So it's actually beyond capitalism and socialism, and it takes some of the best of both. And it creates something totally new, a social entrepreneurial economy.
Lei ha detto power to the people. Now you said power to the people. Il potere...
We overused that in 1968,
Yeah.
but the good news is there's been so much time passing, the young people have no idea of that history.
Yeah.
It's really distributed, but it's lateral power.
It's
We did
lateral
power to the
power.
people. This is
Yeah.
actually lateral power.
Lateral power.
It's different, but it has a, because lateral power means we have the technology now to share information, to share energy, to share business, to collaborate in these smart spaces that are intelligent.
It's not the first time that we hear this message, but it seems so optimistic in a time of crisis like now. Why are you being so optimistic?
Well, you know,
Perché è così ottimista di questa possibilità?
I teach at the Wharton School. It's the oldest business school in the world. I was a student there 45 years ago. I'm a pretty old guy. And I teach business leaders from all over the world. It's the leading business school in the world. When they come to their first day, I say to them, always look to see where the problem is or where the crisis is, because that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah.
You always got to find what is the crisis, then you'll know your opportunity.
Now, how long do you think it will take to reach the goals that you're setting?
Well,
Quanto ci vorrà?
if it follows the same path as the first and second industrial revolution, the first industrial revolution and the second industrial revolution both laid down their infrastructures in 25 years, their juvenile infrastructure, then their mature infrastructure in another 20. The second industrial revolution, for example, centralized telecommunication, electricity, the telephone, then radio and television, became the communication medium to manage the oil, auto, and suburban era in a mass consumer society. So in my country, from 1900 to 1929, we laid down the infrastructure. We centralized electricity and put it across the country, in not everywhere, but in the urban areas. We then laid down we started mass producing the automobile. We put in pipelines for the oil, and then we laid out highways, and we began suburban construction. Then in 1929 it stopped. The Depression, World War II. Then after the war, we matured that infrastructure with the interstate highway systems, biggest public works project in history, nonstop across the country. When we put in the interstate highways, it allowed us to build out the suburban construction, which gave us millions of jobs. We created the fast food culture, the travel culture, and tourism culture. the suburban society.
So you think it's inevitable?
And then that culture peaked in 1988. We've been living off the wealth of that second industrial revolution for 30 years, and now we're broke because we depleted the family savings the last 20 years, went into debt to build globalization based on our purchasing power, but it wasn't based on a new productivity. It was based on actually living off the savings between the 1950s and the 1980s when the second industrial revolution infrastructure came in place. So now we've got to build this third industrial revolution infrastructure. And that is, we've got to put in the renewable energies across Italy. We've got to convert every building to a power plant. We got to set down hydrogen to store this energy across the infrastructure. We have to put in energy internet so we can share the green energy across Italy and Europe. And we have to plug in our transport across Italy to electric plug-in and fuel cell transport. That reshaping the infrastructure is millions and millions of Italian jobs, all local, and thousands of small and medium-sized enterprises to do it, and large companies who will provide expertise. So if this isn't the plan, what is? In other words, as my wife says, this ain't rocket science. If this isn't the plan, we got to get off fossil fuels, we got to get on renewables, and we have to do this. So what is the alternative to this? Laying back in the 20th century where there's no opportunities for this generation of Italians, and getting smaller and smaller and more angry and more frightened. So I'm guardedly hopeful. I'm not an optimist or a pessimist, because I realize at my age, I've been struggling with this for 45 years. This is difficult. Anything could derail this. We could see extreme politics emerge in fear that could take us to the extremes on the right and left, and we could get to a public that doesn't want to reason. But right now in Italy, there's a breath of fresh air. There's a new government. Now the presidents of the regions, the mayors in the cities, the small and medium-sized enterprise associations in each region, the producer and consumer co-ops, the consumer federations, the school system, everyone has to come together in their region and begin laying down this infrastructure. And here's the irony. People say, where's the money? And I'm amused because in Europe, I guess a lot of Italians don't know this, there's billions and billions of euros of regional development funds in the EU to create the sustainable third industrial revolution, and it's not used. It goes back to the kitty at the end of the year. Why? Because the regions don't come together to create the master plans. It just goes back into the kitty. So I think now is the opportunity for Italy. And let me explain the last part why I think Italy can actually move quickly. I actually believe Italy can go one-on-one with Germany together and do this. And Germany's the powerhouse, but Italy's got some assets here to move this in Europe. Here's their first asset. The small and medium-sized enterprises in this country are the best in the world, unmatched in terms of their creativity. 2, Italy is a federation of regions, like Germany. You have a national government, but the regions have some autonomy in a sense. And it fits a third industrial revolution model that has to come in each region, and then you have to cooperate with the other regions nodally. And 3, and this is what I want all of your folks on the website and your print edition to hear. Italy is the Saudi Arabia of renewable energy in Europe. This is a peninsula. And on this peninsula, you have more green energy to harvest than any country in Europe because you have sun all over Italy, especially the southern half. You have wind coming across the entire peninsula on the coast. You have ocean tides and ocean waves across the peninsula for energy. You have a rich reserve of geothermal heat in regions like Tuscany. You have snowdrifts for hydroelectricity coming from the Alps. You have massive forests where you can cull energy in the northern regions of Italy. You have so much green energy that if you apply it with the smart technologies that you have available and with the entrepreneurial spirit of your SMEs and your producer co-ops, you can move. The only thing that's holding this up now is 1, imagination, and 2, this narrative. This narrative has to spread. This conversation about a third industrial revolution has to spread. That's why I wrote this book. We have to really spread this narrative. And 3, you got to get rid of the old politics. It's toxic. We got to be able to have a politics of cooperation based on the principles of the third industrial revolution. Distributed, collaborative behavior, open, transparent ways of governing, and lateral power exercised at every level of this society. Then you can get the job done, and I think Italy can quickly move with Germany on the continent to lead this third industrial revolution.
Sounds good. La domanda era perché è così ottimista, che cosa vede nell'Italia che può funzionare, perché il suo messaggio è molto positivo, ma è un momento di crisi pazzesca. Now, the next question is about the euro. Many are skeptical about the fact that we should be staying in the euro as a currency and in Europe in general. Now, do you have an answer for them? I mean, is the euro and the euro as a currency and Europe as a united federation of countries, do you think that's, I mean,
you better hope the euro,
yeah.
that this crisis leads to a deepening of fiscal responsibility across Europe. And the answer is fairly straightforward. What do you want for Italy? If you eliminate the euro and eliminate the European Union as a playing field, then your children have a smaller and smaller place to make their future. You want to go back to little Italy, little Sweden, little France, little Germany, where there are fewer possibilities, fewer options. You have a younger generation here, especially the Erasmus kids, but you have a younger generation here in Italy. They feel they're Italian, and they may feel that they're from Piedmont, but they also feel they're European, and they also feel they're part of the global society. These old ideas of borders don't make sense in the third industrial revolution, because even though we keep our identities, we like to know we're from a certain region, we're part of a national identity, but also we're part of a continental identity. The European Union's formed, the Asian Union's forming now, the African Union's forming, the South American Union, but also the young people, they don't limit their identities. The young people up on the internet, they're in global social spaces. Their Facebook page is global. The young kids on the Arab Spring, they have more in common with their global Facebook than their tribal blood ties. So what I think we have to realize here is that what we want is a broader playing field, more inclusive, more open, less bordered. What we need to do now is, if Italians say to themselves, I want to be back into Little Italy and divide out. If you did a referendum on that tomorrow, said, okay, let the Italians vote. We're going to go on our own. People would panic. Or if someone said we should expel Italy from the Union, people would panic. So let's get over all of this gropping, this arguments about do we want to be in the Eurozone. Chancellor Merkel got it right. What we need now is a deeper Europe, a more integrated Europe. And so the third industrial revolution is the golden goose. And let me explain it, then we'll end. Europe has a golden goose. You've got to feed it. There are 500 million consumers in the European Union in 27 states. And you have an additional 500 million consumers in your partnership regions in the Mediterranean, North Africa, into Russia, etc. So you have a billion-person market, potentially the wealthiest market in the world. You need to feed the golden goose. The golden goose is this: set up a third industrial revolution infrastructure across Europe so everyone's embedded and collaborating and sharing their energy with each other. Then, once that happens nodally across Europe, you create across Europe a seamless green electricity grid, a seamless transport and communication network, so that 1 billion people in Europe and the partnership regions can engage in commerce and trade in an integrated single market, the biggest in the world. And you're telling me that Italians don't want to do that? Especially Italy, which is a major exporting country? You'd be nuts not to do that. So the future is continental markets. That's the next. When we go to a third industrial revolution, which is bottom, we start to spread infrastructure across continents and create integrated markets and political unions. So the EU is ideally positioned. It's the first mature political union, and it's moving toward a continental market. Now, as Chancellor Merkel said, close the deal. Put this third industrial revolution infrastructure down, bring people together in an integrated market, get off carbon, and create the first sustainable, livable economy in the world. That's the European dream. Quality of life, sustain one, create a single internal market for 500 million people and an additional 500 million people in your partnership regions. 2, reach the 2020 objectives of becoming the first green, sustainable, post-carbon society in the world. And 3, realize the European dream. This is a great dream that the younger generation in Europe has. The dream's based on the fact that we should have a good quality of life. That's a community exercise. It means each of us are responsible for each other to create a quality of life. 2, we build bridges of peace. The European vision is to move from the geopolitics of a top-down world to the biosphere politics of a lateral world. And 3, we need to begin to live in a society where the economy allows everyone an opportunity, not only to be an entrepreneur, but to collaborate and share in deep social commons. These are the it's the land of opportunity, but it's the land of opportunity where we create opportunity. Well, in the U.S., the American dream was limited. It was each individual as an island to themselves creates opportunity. The European dream is each individual contributes to the common good and has to be very entrepreneurial, but collaborates in social commons for quality of life. Quality of life requires the whole community. No one gets left behind. That's the dream of the 21st century. That's the dream of the internet generation. That's the dream of the October 15th movement, and that's lateral power.
And I think this is a good ending.
No, my knees.
Thank you very much.